Hello, everybody, and welcome to IACommand. This is TV Boy, and we've got a special guest on today to talk to you guys about a really cool expansion, custom expansion that made for Imperial Assault that features the Clone Wars factions. And this is for skirmish and for, or soon to be for campaign, but it's being developed for both. And yeah, welcome to the podcast and to the channel, Jayjaxx. Thank you for joining me.
Hello. Yeah, happy to be here. It's a lovely project that has consumed however many months of my life. I think it's 8 now, and I'm happy that everyone's enjoying it.
Yeah, and I've got some of the cards up on the screen here, but we'll talk about the individual cards as we go. But why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself for folks that don't know you already? Who are you, and what's kind of your history with Imperial Assault?
Well, I'm Jay or Jayjaxx with two X's as I generally go on username. And I mean, where's there to start? I guess I started playing campaign. I can't entirely remember when. It must have been like 4 or 5 years ago. With some friends, and then we played a lot of the campaign because it was fun. And eventually, we I got to uh, playing so much of it that it felt not necessarily stale, but like there was a little bit of work needed to, or like you needed to kind of play with your own rules, kind of thing. And then I decided to, or that kind of gave me the penchant to just do it myself, and so I did. Or am doing.
Awesome. And then let's see, when did you get into it? So you started with campaign, right?
Yeah, yeah. So this project started as a campaign project. As I'd never played skirmish before I started the project. I uh, played my first skirmish games just to when I was developing this just a few months ago to try and see how the game worked to get into the groove of skirmish and see what would fly and what wouldn't. What I needed to change to make them specific to skirmish. But yeah, it was originally going to be a campaign project, and then I did some of the campaign, and you probably can still find it, I believe, and there are some uh, posts out with all the missions, and you can access them. Although I am redoing it with the lessons learned from skirmish and all the testing done there, and all the playtesting done from the campaign beforehand. So
Oh, cool. Cool to hear that
yeah.
you were able to take some of the stuff from the skirmish playtesting and apply it to the campaign. That's awesome. Um, I should
Oh,
mention,
definitely.
I should mention for folks, full transparency. This is actually our second time recording this. I'm an idiot, and I lost the original recording as I was trying to delete files. I would save space on my disk hard drive. So if anything sounds a little awkward, know that some of this has already been talked about. But we're gonna be going into other stuff too that we didn't get a chance to talk about the first time. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, you got into skirmish. You played skirmish basically because you wanted to make the skirmish cards for this expansion, right?
Yes. It's the only real reason why I dived into it. Not that I didn't like it, it was just that I had never been exposed to it before. Now I have.
Awesome. So I think we should just jump into the cards. We'll start off. We've got technically three factions because you did make cards for the mercenary faction as well as, but you did go ahead and make two totally new factions for the game: the Republic and the Confederacy, right?
Yep.
And it's always interesting
Yeah.
trying to create a brand new faction because you have to kind of create an identity for the faction. And how did you go about doing that for your cards and your factions?
Well, I started with the deployment cards, just like the two kind of core deployment cards. The first deployment cards I made was the Clone Squad, and then the B1 battle droids, the B2 battle droids, and the droidicas, which I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk about in a bit. Although it's renamed to Trooper Squad now, so it'll be closer to the bottom. Uh, yep. Uh, the Obviously the Republic became the Empire, and as such, the stormtroopers and the clones should echo each other. And originally, they were carbon copies of each other, except the clones rolled two blue dice and had a search for Pierce instead of a search for accuracy. That was the only difference. And when we played it, it was fine. It just kind of felt boring. No, and then when I got to making more stuff, um, you'll see that there's a second quite long ability on there called Clone Squad, and why don't you give that a read and see where that came out of?
Yeah, so let's look at the trooper. So the elite trooper, is it only the elites have the clone squad? They
Both of them
they
have
both
it.
do, right?
Just the Yeah.
And I should mention for folks that are watching on the video, the cards that you made, the Republic has the rebel symbol to represent their faction, and the CIS has the Empire symbol to represent their faction. However, they are distinct factions, and so it says in your like README FAQ document that you have for this that anytime you see a card on here that has the rebel faction, that just only means Republic, unless it also says like rebel next to it, and vice versa for the Empire. And I know that's just because the card maker software that you use that's made by the community only has the rebel and Empire and scum symbols on it, right?
Yeah, so I'll have to go in through with Photoshop and change them all before release, which of course isn't now. So unfortunately, you're stuck with this.
Yeah, we are still in the pre-release phase of this, right?
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully, I should be getting the skirmish release. I'd imagine before the end of February. The campaign, I'm not sure, just because campaign stuff takes a long time to test. Very long time to test.
Yeah, that's for sure. Okay, so back to the clone troopers. They have clone squad. So while building your army, you may choose one elite squad member, which is italicized as a trait. Replace one figure in this group with one figure from that group and increase this group's cost by one. It retains this group's non-surge abilities. Is that part new? The retaining non-surge abilities?
No, not. It's not new for a while.
Okay.
It was definitely there since at least the start of the pre-release.
Mm.
Um, it wasn't
Okay.
always there in my
So
dev time, but
what does that? What does this mean? I'll pull up some squad member cards while you talk.
yeah. So basically, while you're going through building your army or in campaign when they get deployed, you can look at all of the six squad members, which you're pulling up the sharpshooter now, and all those squad member groups are normally two-man groups. Uh, and if you want, you can you can replace one of your regular clone guys with one of the squad members that you pick, um, of the same elite or regular type. And by doing so, not only do you get this kind of mixed squad, you also get the squad member. He also gets squad training, and in the case of the elites, that plastoid armor, which reduces pierce. Um, so that you can specialize your squads a little bit at the cost of a small point increase, and they're also the squad members are also a little bit stronger than if you were to just take them on their own. Of course, at the cost of uh, well, second guy and not being able to synergize quite as well. So you have this mixed squad that's not really sure what it's doing. It's more versatile.
Yeah, and you've got it set so that elite trooper squad brings elite squad members, and then the non-elite trooper squad brings, well,
Yeah,
it should be
yeah. It
non-elite,
doesn't say that right now, but it will.
right?
That's a mistake that you brought up to me some time ago. But yeah, it will have to be regular.
Okay, so very similar to like the squad upgrade mechanic that we made for um, IACP, but I don't think you had. You said you hadn't seen it prior, right?
No, I saw the squad upgrade mechanic well after. In fact, while I was talking to, I think some of you guys, I believe the first I heard of this squad upgrade thing was when I first showed it to someone that had been in the IACP community. I forget who, sorry, and had brought up this. Oh, it's like squad upgrades, and I went and looked, and yeah, if I had known, then they probably would have ended up as being squad upgrades, but I didn't. So here we are
But
with this kind of hybrid system, and I think it's neat.
it is different because with the squad upgrades in ICP, you can't bring like a Z6 trooper as its own squad. It can only come attached to another existing deployment group. But with yours, you can
Yeah,
bring those heavy, like heavy trooper or assault troopers. Like I fielded a squad of these guys, like six of them, as their own squad. So it's kind of
yeah,
it's interesting and different, similar but different for sure.
yeah.
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
No, that's it. I mean, yeah, you get to bring them, but of course they're you don't get any of the squad training, so you don't get the rerolls, you don't get the plastoid armor in the case of the other ones, and you don't get the two other bodies for rel discounted-ish price uh, to soak up troops for your big guy.
Was it tough getting the costing correct for the squad member system?
Uh, I mean, they definitely went through a lot of prices. I think they were at 9 and 10. They were at 9 and 9, and you just got a squad member for free. They were at I think 7 and 8, and then they're at 8 and 9, where they are now, um, and where I think that they belong to be. Uh, so yeah, it was a bit, especially because all the squad members cost the same, and as such, their groups need to cost the same. So balancing them all around the same 6 and 3 for a two-man group was also kind of difficult. Um, but we got there in the end. At least I hope so.
Okay, yeah, I see that now. So all the elites are 6 and 3, and all the regulars are what, five,
Four and
four
two.
and two. Okay,
Yeah,
so that's clever. So that helps with keeping all the costing consistent, where it's not like you're getting a big discount for one over the other because it's more expensive, and you have a set cost for the squad upgrade, always costing one extra point to swap out for the trooper squad. So yeah,
yeah, that's right.
it's clever. It's very clever.
Well, thank you
Um,
very much.
and then the other thing that I would say is part of the faction identity for Republic is definitely the Force users, even
Yeah.
more so than CIS, right?
Definitely, the CIS has a strange identity to it, where the Republic has its troopers, has its force users, and then they also have a very strong kind of synergistic and self buff kind of theme to them, where almost all of their cards, I think minus two of them, either have some sort of buff to hand out someone to someone else, or in some ways are linked either like by leeching off of some other group. Um, and those two are I think Anakin Skywalker and oh yeah, Mace Windu, as well as their tank. So it's actually three that don't have any of that.
Okay, sorry, I'm trying to bring up the card images, but I've been having some internet trouble. But yeah, they are a lot more like synergy based compared to some of the other factions. Kind of like how Rebels are, but maybe more specific to specific types of figures. Like we've got the Jedi Knights here, the generic Jedi that can pass off a. Although actually this is okay for another friendly. These can do it to anybody. So these guys just care about
Yeah,
power tokens, right?
yeah, yeah. When they get a power token, they get to pass one off to one of their buddies,
Which just
which has
synergizes
proven
well
to
with
be
like
quite strong
Ahsoka.
with extra armor,
Oh yeah, with extra armor, doubles your armor
as well as
tokens.
the numerous tokens.
Um,
There's a lot of power tokens in here.
so what are some standouts? You mentioned Mace Windu, I think, but what are some of the deployment cards we should be looking at to see what
Well, I mean,
Republic's all about?
think that Padme, despite being the only figure that in the faction that is not a trooper nor a force user, I think is actually very important to the Republic. She hasn't seen much play in the tournaments, but at least in campaign, she's seen a well every time she can be brought. She's been brought, and she has seen some play in the tournament to some regard, where she gets to hand out a whole bunch of surge abilities to a lot of her crew. You can see that it hands out extra damage and recovery, which is scarce. An evade token, which okay, but also stun that can be very dangerous. As I believe this is the only source of stun um, in the Republic. I think there might be one other. Yeah.
Yeah, so Padme is 5 points, and her exemplar ability lets other friendly figures within 3 spaces use her surge abilities, which includes a surge for +2, surge for recover 2, and a surge for stun, and a surge to gain 1 evade power token. Um, she also can focus, but only if she suffers damage during an opponent's activation. She can choose a friendly figure within 3 spaces to become focused. So yeah, you mentioned she was quite strong in campaign, but from what we've seen in skirmish, I played against her, and I remember thinking she was before I played against her, thinking she looked pretty weak. But when I played against her, it was kind of similar. It was very dice dependent. Like 1 or 2 times somebody got to use a surge for +2 for an extra damage. But
Mm.
do you think there's I know we talked about this before, but obviously we're doing it again. Do you think there's just such a big difference between is it the difference between campaign and skirmish, the way that those play that makes her so different, or is it just people are sleeping on her for skirmish?
Well, partially it's going to be the difference between campaign and skirmish. They're obviously different environments, and there are a lot better access to surges in campaign. In a lot of the Republic faction, most of your range attacks are blue blue or blue green, neither of which have a particularly high surge ratio, especially to cross that barrier to not only doing your own surges, but also doing Padme surges without access to things like surge tokens, which they do have access to, but it's lesser. Um, but I do believe that she's not necessarily being slept on, but not being considered quite as much as I think that she should be for much of the skirmish. I'm not
Yeah,
really sure why that is. I think the people are overlooking how powerful stun is, as well as some of the figures can actually get decent surges relatively reliably. Largely sharpshooters, as well as the Republic Commandos, who have a base surge plus a blue green.
I don't know what your campaign missions look like, but as I'm currently playing through a campaign, and I played all through all the campaigns. I'm thinking back to it, like a lot of the campaign play is a lot more spatially condensed to a smaller area. You usually don't
Yeah.
have a bunch of figures spreading out. Whereas I think in skirmish, you have to spread your army out a little bit because there's objectives all over the map. You have to go where your opponent's going and counter your opponent's movements, and it's a little less like you don't have a ball of enemies in front of you like you do in campaign. So I wonder if maybe that was also an issue. Is just that aura from exemplars maybe a little smaller in skirmish than it is in campaign.
Yeah, that's definitely another factor, and especially the lack of free movement, if I would say, in campaign. Sorry, in skirmish, where campaign you can strain to move if you're a space out. In skirmish, you need to spend a move action, and if you have something else you want to do, be it opening a door or assaulting or a special action, uh, command card, then you're just kind of SOL.
Yeah, but I mean we've seen that ability on like Soren be successful, especially in IACP once he got recosted. So it could
Yeah,
be just she just needs a little more play.
could be.
Let's see. Last ones to mention for the Republic would be
I mean, I think we need to talk about Anakin.
Yeah, let's talk about Anakin. So Anakin went through some
The
changes.
big man.
Yeah. And there's some interesting kind of pre-built lists you have for him, both the Brothers in Blood with Obi-Wan, and then the Nightfall, which is a skirmish upgrade. Not a pre-built list, but it restricts what you can bring with him. But yeah,
Yeah.
what do we want to say about Anakin?
Well, Anakin was my attempt to make a figure that actually costs 18 points. Of course, Vader saw no play in skirmish until he got, and no play in campaign until he got that 5 cost reduction from Driven by Hatred, I believe. And Anakin, well, I started with Vader's baseline of 18 points, 4 speed, 16 health, and a pretty beefy lightsaber attack. Uh, and then just started adding stuff on, making his Pierce base, giving him pretty solid cleave, +2 and focus on the same surge. And then eventually, what he came to is now he's doing 3 actions per turn. He can assault. He can do as many as he wants. He has a damage cap, which is a new kind of mechanic that I straight up ripped from 40k, which was something that I had a lot of experience with, to make him actually survive the very high amount of damage that exists in skirmish as compared to campaign.
Yeah, and it's definitely challenging to make a figure worth that much points without it becoming a problem of number one, you have points fortressing, which is something that we used to see in X-wing with big ships that are really hard to kill because you don't have partial points in Imperial Assault for skirmish. But the other problem being like the tempo advantage you can get from one big activation killing multiple figures all at the same time. I think that's what was happening in the first iteration when I saw it. Like
Yes.
Anakin just kind of moved over, like he triple walked over to the opponent's deployment zone at the end of a round, and then started next round. It was like kill, 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 3 figures. Uh,
Actually, it was worse than that. He was double moving up because he was 5 speed back then, and then he was readying his own deployment card using his old Twist of Fate ability,
uh,
and then getting another 3 attacks off with heroic and brutality, plus a move because that's only cost 1 action to do heroic and brutality. But he doesn't do that anymore. He has his attack and defense has been leveled out a little bit more. Uh,
yeah. No, I think the changes you've gone through have been really good. I initially was questioning the max 10 damage mechanic. It just seemed like it would be hard to keep track of. But on on Vassal at least, I just put out a little note and put tokens on it, and he was fun to play for sure, especially with the Brothers in Blood being able to activate him twice was a lot of fun. And of
yep.
course, there I did figure out you had already figured it out it seems, but if you can recover, I think it was 5 damage from him in a
Yep.
round, then you get to use the Twist of Fate ability again for another round, and the opponent can't kill him for 2 rounds. So that was fun.
Yeah, you need to do 21 damage, which obviously is 2 Twist of Fate triggers. But or not necessarily triggers because it's a static ability, but it doesn't really matter. But yeah, in case you're wondering what this Brothers in Blood, the actual card is called Brothers in All But Blood,
Oh yeah,
is a 10-point skirmish upgrade. Which, yeah, 10-point skirmish upgrade that you can only include if you have exactly Anakin and Obi-Wan, which comes out to a total of 30 points, plus the 10 makes your whole list. That means that you get to activate both of them, Anakin and Obi-Wan, twice per round instead of one, to really wreck some face with them both.
and then the other one is Nightfall, right? And you said, did
Yeah,
somebody play
Nightfall was
this?
other. Not in the tournament. I played it a couple of times,
Oh, this is the one that
but
lets him use
notably in
Vader's
Europe.
card, right?
Yeah, so it lets them use Vader's card as well as Dark Side Force user cards.
Which,
And let me tell you, Anakin with Lord of the Sith, as he every time he gets a kill, he gets another action back. Whew, he can clean through.
yeah, because he has assault, so there's nothing to stop him from always just keep attacking
Yep.
and killing stuff and getting more actions. Well, I guess
Yep.
depending on how many figures are around him. So
Definitely, yeah, and that's the major limiting factor. If your opponent knows it's coming and can space out relatively well, then sure, you might still get like 5 kills, but then he usually dies.
yeah.
So whether or not those 5 kills are worth 20 points or whatever it eventually comes out to, how much you sink into making this Anakin Voltron strategy work, and who knows?
So I think we'll just, since we're here, we'll talk about some of the other squad upgrades or skirmish upgrades for the Republic. I did want to call out
Sure.
the Legion cards that you had made. These were skirmish upgrades that you can only have one. They have a special trait called Legion trait. You can only have one Legion card in your army. Can you talk to me a little about this? We have 187th here. There's like 212, 501st.
Yeah, there are 4 legions. Well, the legions were an attempt to, as I was originally making the factions, I didn't think that the Republic was strong enough. I think they would kind of fall flat on their face, and it turned out I was wrong. So I tried to print these legion things, which I thought would be kind of lists that would cards that would tie the whole list together, because they didn't have enough already. Shows what I know. That would let kind of their Jedi general as well as their troopers kind of try and mix together relatively well. For example, if you look at the 187th here, they allow the troopers to take damage from that was directed at a force user, nearby force user, and then lets the force users heal the troopers when they get kills. This was originally intended for Mace Windu, as being the 187th is his legion, uh, and to try and kind of patch up the issues with Mace Windu being a all attack. Of course, we didn't see him, but he doesn't have any defensive abilities. He's all attack all the time, and he's very good at it. But and the other legions are similar, of just trying to cohesively put together a I guess like a universal buff to this action. Of course, they didn't need it. Not that the legions were too strong. It's just that people didn't really run them. There was some play of the 501st, but that was largely it that saw play. Uh,
Yeah, it makes sense that to make these so that you'd get players to want to mix the troopers and the force users, because I think otherwise the
yeah,
natural inclination for skirmish players is to try to maximize as much of one trait as you can to build around it, because of course the more of a single trait you have in your overlapping trait synergy you have, the easier it is to play your powerful command cards that are limited to that type of trait. But
yeah,
these seem like a nice way to get people to mix them.
yeah. We saw that same kind of list building mentality in a lot of the Confederate lists,
Hmm.
and while it worked ish for all droid lists, it didn't really work for all the force user lists, because all of their force users, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute, are all very aggressive and have very poor defensive profiles, and as such, they just kind of die if they don't have their chump droids to take hits for them.
Hmm. Also, something I didn't realize when I was looking at all this, but you pointed out to me earlier, is that there's the three of the four legions are for the respective Jedi's, right? So 187th is for Mace Windu, 212
Yeah.
for Obi-Wan, and 501st for Anakin, which should be obvious now that I look at them and the troopers pictured. 442nd is not anyone in particular, right?
No, I don't believe that there was a 442nd had a Jedi General listed. For this, I just kind of tried to invent something that would be all right. What's kind of like an urban combat uh, thing, and I came up with this kind of ability, as well as each of the legions also tried to get like a specific aspect of the Republic's faction identity. For example, the Republic had very good access like to troopers and force users, so that was the Mace Windu's 187th. and you have the kind of uh, reasonable access to focus, as well as strong defenses, which would be the 212th. And then you have the power tokens, which come from the 442nd. And then the 501st was kind of unique, but that's largely because it was built to echo Vader's finest, being given that Vader's finest was the 501st, well, is the 501st, very literally.
Nice. And
Also
then
wasn't known in this
we've
period.
we've got a 0 point skirmish upgrades for both Jedi's and troopers. Now, Jedi's, you only get to use it if you have all Jedi's, so that kind of goes against the mixing, squad mixing, but of course people love to play
Yep.
all Jedi's, and that lets you use a Force User command card basically twice, but on a different activation, right?
Yeah, yeah. I really like the idea of these kind of list building. Like if you come up with a flavorful-ish list that has like this stuff in it, then you get this extra bonus. And that's what Nightfall was. That's what Jedi Strike Force is. That's also what Brothers and Ball of Blood was. Which is like, all right, I want to run this, and all right, I'll print a skirmish upgrade to let you do it more competitively. Uh, Probably not A list, but at least solid.
Just realized I was muted.
No, Born Soldiers was a patch because a lot of the issues that stemmed in early playtesting from the Republic was that their accuracy was very iffy, um, which shouldn't be the case. A lot of them were rolling blue blue, which not only does not have access to surges, a lot of them didn't really have surge for accuracy, largely because it just kind of felt weird to put surging for accuracy on blue blue, the range die. Uh, so while a lot of them had good accuracy, it was very unreliable, and as such, Born Soldiers was made and is getting a little bit of tweak in the release, I think, to make their attacks more reliable, uh, and really overlook the range issue, which didn't really crop up in campaign because everything's within 5 spaces of you in campaign, and it's all so tight, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, but then if you give them a surge for accuracy, you both are taking away their damage cap and also potentially making them too accurate and hitting at ranges that don't feel correct. So I guess this is kind of a nice way to bridge the gap between being a mid-range, very accurate mid-range, but not a sniper.
For most of the figures, yeah. It,
Okay, and then I think that's it. Oh, did you? I think we didn't talk about this before, but you also had a Bad Batch card, right?
uh, I mean, it's not. It's just the art there that you can, if you wanted, you could have like some really weird squad where you have 3 squad members instead of two
Oh, I
two
see.
clones represent a squad member. Doesn't really matter. We don't really need to talk about it that much. Just
Okay.
nobody ran it, uh, and yeah,
Okay. I think the only ones we
some
didn't talk
Frankenstein's.
about was talked about Mace a little bit. Yoda was kind of important, right?
Yeah, if you wanted to. Yeah, sure. If you want to talk about Yoda, Yoda's cool. He's getting a little bit of a touch up. Um,
He's kind of the
yeah,
support figure, but also a pretty strong attacker.
he's a decent attacker. I wouldn't call him a strong attacker, but he's passable at being the 7 points there, with his main purpose being support and a little bit of solid mobility there, because he can really get somewhere and stay there with precognition there, adding a dodge. He can very reliably just kind of sit in a place and be fine because the big attack, whatever the big attack turns out to be, you can just dodge it
Yeah, precognition is very strong. Just adds a dodge once per round. When the attack is declared, at
on
least.
declare. Yeah.
Yeah, so they don't get to, he doesn't get to see the dice roll first, but very strong ability. And then he does have assault though, so he does have a high damage cap on how much damage he can deal in an activation if he's in the right place at the right time. I mean, assault's pretty much like
Yes,
pummel.
which
Yeah.
Yeah, if he's in the right place, but he's usually not. It's difficult to get that. I don't think I've ever seen anybody be able to pull off two attacks with assault. It'll be a little bit easier to do with his touch up. He's getting reach, but
Mm.
still, it'd be difficult.
That would be very good with assault. Well, I think should we move on to the CIS then?
Yes, yes. The CIS was definitely the more challenging of the two factions to create, and I think it. I don't want to say it comes through, but I'm pretty sure that it does. They're a little bit not necessarily more stilted, but drawn in two directions, might I say.
Yeah, maybe a little less cohesive feeling than the Republic.
Yeah, the CIS is filled with mostly specialist groups. They have very few generalists, and the few generalists that they do have are okay, but they aren't great. So all of their specialist groups are very good at what they do, but when list building, a lot of people try and focus on a single thing, and we found that if you go all in on this thing, and it can be very strong, it usually falls apart up against anything that even vaguely counters you. And a good example of that is, of course, the B1 there, which costs 6 for 1, and you get three figures on it. And well, there are another three figures on the right there, another three flags. So it's a six-figure group, the first six-figure group, and probably the only one there. And they're only two health, black die, but they have a minus block, so you're not going to be defending all against all that much. But a good example of their all or nothingness is that they do basically nothing against static defenses, but also with only two health against any kind of blast or cleave, they tend to fold very swiftly. Anytime they don't get to roll their defense die, they're basically screwed. And in fact, in campaign, this reason is why I came up with a new campaign mechanic uh, called a multi attack, where two of the heroes have access to a type of attack where you roll the attack pool once against like a big AOE, but each defender rolls their defense die separately and spends the surges separately.
And that's so cool that you came up with that because that's actually how Blast used to work in Descent Second Edition, the game that Imperial Assault was originally based on, but a fantasy game is that's exactly what you said. Whenever an attack had Blast in that game, you would take whatever the attack roll was, and you would have each adjacent figure roll a defense dice against that attack roll and then take damage. So it's kind of neat that they took that away, obviously because it takes more time to do that, and instead it
Yeah.
just made more sense to just do a static damage to each adjacent figure. But for your game, and I'm not, and again, I'm not saying you took this from that. I think it was just convergent evolution. That solution
Yeah.
worked for what you were trying to do with the B1s and what you needed from them.
Yeah. And it's a campaign only mechanic, which is probably fair because people have more tolerance for long and kind of I don't want to say convoluted, but this wouldn't fly in skirmish, but it doesn't because there's more tools in skirmish to deal with their weaknesses. Largely the other 34 points.
Also, probably works a lot better in like tabletop, like in real life. I could see it being easy
Yeah.
to just point, roll, point, roll, point, roll with your finger. But on Vassal, it's
Yeah.
like you have to click, highlight, roll, click. Yeah, anyway. Or,
Yeah. On tabletop simulator it was fine, but on Vassal I could imagine it being a real pain.
yeah. I'll say one more thing about the B1s. This one is kind of like very emblematic to me of what ended up being like a design, almost a patchwork design, but like you can see the layers getting added onto it as the playtesting went on and on, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Where we've got, so looking at it, I think it started with networked targeting and
Yeah, they
done
were
as
added in
bricks.
order, very literally.
Yeah, okay, so network targeting is like the base ability. Standardized cannot be equipped with attachments that do not specifically mention or apply to you. Um, so like because of course targeting computer would give you 6 rerolls. There was another attachment you mentioned that was broken with
Yeah, in
them.
campaign, there's an attachment I think called assault armor or riot armor or something like that that gives each group +2 health, straight up doubling and giving you +12 total, which was also busted. I was in military might.
Yeah. So
Um,
and that makes sense. So attachments are balanced around being put on 2, maybe 3 figures in a group. So having 6 figures all benefiting from attachment, if it doesn't exhaust, it's very overpowered for sure. And then dumb
yeah,
as bricks interaction requires 2 actions, and of course this leads into kind of the theory in Imperial Assault of action economy, where every figure gets 2 actions, but how expensive a figure is determines how valuable or those or how much you're paying for those actions, right? So like Vader's 2 actions are very inefficient because he's 13 points for, so each of those actions is like worth 6.5 points of value. But if you're getting 6 figures for only 6 points, that's 12 actions. So you had to, it looks
yeah.
like you had to kind of compensate for that, realizing that it was just too easy to have a 1 point figure that can do what normally would take a 2 to 6 point figure to accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, imagine like one of the maps that has a whole lot of interacting, like Tarkin B, I think, is the one with the special weapons.
Yeah, the abandoned research.
Without the
Yep.
yeah, with the if the B ones could run up, could both move and interact, or interact and then shoot, it would just be absolute chaos, or something like that. Because they're so cheap and you can get the interactions basically for free. Largely, the problem was move and interact. You could like move and then open a door, or and then let everyone else shoot through. But the knock-on effects are, of course, also making the action economy better or more more realistic.
Yeah. And then finally, they have worthless, which is that opponents cannot use abilities that trigger when you are defeated. And this seems pretty much directly targeted at Jabba's nefarious gains.
It was exactly that. Yeah, we someone reported a game and talked about it and said, "Oh yeah, Jabba just kind of blew me out because I was running B1s," and then it's like, "Oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's right." And it also does hit other on death effects, but it was largely targeted at Jabba, and the other on death effects should also probably have been exempted as well. So I don't think there's any issue there, and it's all good stuff. It is kind of weird having your bog standard normal guys being having 4 abilities in a smaller text box than normal, but hey, the prices you got to pay for a 6 point group, right?
So I think that only stops worth every credit and Jabba. Is there anything else that in skirmish that
I
stops?
I don't know about on skirmish. I know in campaign there's a few.
Oh, there's a few in campaign. Okay. All right. So um, that's the B1. I think the other one that's kind of the tent pole of this faction, or I don't know what to call it, but poster child that we should talk
Tentpole's
about,
fine. Yeah.
the Droideka.
Yeah. Sure.
So, and that way we can talk about the energy shield as well.
Yeah.
So the energy shield is an ability that's on the Droideka. It's on a couple other cards. I think the Scorpionek has it, and there's an attachment for the BX battle droids or BX command droids that lets them
Yep.
grant it to another figure. And it says whenever you suffer
Yeah, and it also
damage,
gives them.
yeah. Oh yeah, and on them. It says whenever you suffer damage, if it is less than 4 damage, you suffer no damage. So this one's always interesting. I think we've definitely taken. I know the steering committee. We've taken our try at trying to design for this theme of the energy shields, and it's very tricky because you can either go one way or the other, right? With how much damage it takes to
Yeah.
damage them, and either way, it kind of screws somebody over. So how did you arrive at this? You have so basically if they ever suffer 3 damage or less, it completely cancels out the damage.
Yeah. So why don't you look at the basic one, because the basic is what I worked with when I was originally developing these. Um, that should not be in that folder. I don't know why that's in that folder. It doesn't matter. Uh,
Okay, there we go.
and if you just look at it, its text box, you've got assault, which it kind of has to have. He doesn't necessarily need to have the two surge bars, but okay, whatever, it doesn't. And then it's got wheel form, which move lets it move faster if it negates the energy shield. Um, and when I wanted to make wheel form, all right, well, we have the fast moving that doesn't have an energy shield, and then we have the stand up thing that we see on the arts that has the energy shield. So I have to have an ability for it. I can't just like, I guess I could slam like a flat +1 block or something like that, but I decided not to. And I have no text space. I mean, I could make the text really small, but I don't want to do that, especially for kind of a normal-ish, as you put a tentpole group. Um, and so and I I do like keeping the text small. I am really not a fan of how Dooku looks with his tiny text, that I'm sure we'll see in a minute. Um, and the real thing with Energy Shield that was that the Droideka has 3 health. This basic Droideka has 3 health, and it negates any damage that's less than 3. Uh, it's getting a little bit of a touch up, but basically it means that if you get through the shield, it's a one shot. But if you don't get through the shield, you don't do anything to it. There's no stacking damage, and that I tried to like acknowledge as like the shield recharging in between attacks or something like that, and one big attack will blow them away. Because people have come to me with ideas like, oh yeah, you can do like, oh yeah, we're recharging like shield tokens or healing or stuff like that, but they don't really work, and they aren't simple too. It's not just a single sentence thing. And another thing with this is that it also catches non-attack damage. It also catches blast. It catches cleave. It catches stuff that are non-attack like grenadier, and that helps again with the Confederacy's very obvious weakness to that kind of no defense die damage. Uh, and the Energy Shield helps negate that and actually makes them competent against the damage dealers like Bosk in skirmish, or I think I mentioned Grenadier, um, that just do flat damage with their generally low health totals. Uh,
Yeah, so it and it definitely it kind of punishes small bits of damage like you mentioned, but also like low point figures. So the more popular thing in IA and skirmish at least is to make big attacks, which work against them. But like you said, they're immune to things like blast and all that. It also works well with certain cards.
Yeah, you mentioned those last time. Like Overdrive, I think was the big one that I did not consider because, of course, I did not make these original cards considering Skirmish was a campaign project, so I didn't even know this card existed. Um,
Yeah. Did
but
Are you considering like, well, first of all, is the overdrive combo, like, is that a problem? So lets all droids, a 3 point card lets all droids perform an extra action by taking 2 damage, and then because of the shield ability, they basically get an extra action without taking any damage. And because they have assault, that extra action can be an attack, so they can do
yeah,
multiple attacks.
I
Uh,
mean, it very well could be a problem. We haven't seen anybody run it, at least as far as I'm aware. People might have run it, but they didn't play it.
I did.
Uh, oh, you did?
I did.
Okay,
Yeah, it was
well,
in one of my game logs. It was fun.
I guess I missed it. Sorry. Uh,
It wasn't broken.
Actually, yeah,
It wasn't that broken.
there was a game log that you were missing. I wonder if that's that one.
Oh, I didn't send it to
Um,
you. Shoot.
on the you and Wesley, I think. Anyway, it doesn't particularly matter. The point is it broken? Maybe it's broken. Uh, it probably won't be a problem on the basic Droidkas. Their low attack damage is probably fine, as well as their relatively ease of dealing with it. Because if they die, if they get one shot, they get one shot. It's not like it's an all or nothing thing. Anyway, with the elite ones, it could be more of a problem, especially with their high damage output. Um, and you could move 6 and then double attack, and then the second attack could be focused. So it could be very, very strong there. Um, and they might end up needing to get a touch up there. I'm not entirely sure how I would go about that, because you either build it into the card, uh, like build in the power budget of overdrive into the card, and then it becomes a very weak card without overdrive,
Right.
or you just say, all right, I guess that's a problem, and leave it, and then it becomes a normal card without overdrive, and then becomes very good with overdrive.
Yeah.
Uh, so I'm not a huge fan of balancing around 3 point cards that are only one of in the deck, that you can't really tutor, that you or search for, I guess, if you don't know the term tutor. Um, it becomes a real design nightmare, those kind of super powerful cards. So I'm probably just not going to touch it and say, okay, maybe it's just very good with the Jayjaxx.
Yeah, I was thinking you just make it while they're defending, but then the problem is that then it doesn't stop stuff like blast and cleave, which was part of your goal. So
Yeah,
it is very tricky, and it's probably like you said, it's probably works well enough the way it is that comboing the way it not combos, but I mean even for me, like the overdrive thing is less about is this broken and more about like does this make sense? Like that their shields are protecting them from overclocking their motors, like but it's
well, you have
you have
plenty
to,
of weird stuff like that, but like it
exactly
protects them from strain, it protects them from bleed. Why can droids bleed? I mean, if you get into this kind of pontificating, does it
right.
make sense design, it just stops. Things really grind to a halt, especially in a
Eventually,
game as,
yeah,
I don't want to say as simple, but like as low detail, as low resolution as Imperial Assault, which is
yeah,
not a bad thing. Generally, they're good, by the way. I don't want anyone to take that
yeah, no,
the wrong way.
um, no, yeah. If you try to cover everything in that way, eventually you do get stuck, or you end up with a very wordy ability that's trying to cover all its bases. So you do have to sometimes choose between simplicity, effectiveness, and flavor. So totally understandable there.
Yeah,
I
and I
mean,
think the energy shield is a decent hedge between the three.
yeah, and an important thing is if it's doing what you want as as a game designer and creating the gameplay that you want to see and making things work the way you want it to for people playing your game, then that is fine. That you just do that, and there are externalities that people just have to deal with.
Yep.
Um,
And of course, this whole project being IA compatible, or sorry, ICP compatible, means that as you guys print stuff, if you hit droids, then that could throw my balance out of whack, as we have uh, kind of seen with a few people asking me about season 9 stuff.
oh yeah,
But
yeah.
uh,
Meditation
I don't
is a
know about
fun
it.
one.
That's the thing.
So
It's a
and
changing game.
and we're all constantly trying to balance things around stuff that already exists in both the default game and the IACP game. And yeah, it I could see stuff in the future from ICP ending up being broken with something from this expansion, because it's too
Almost
hard
certainly.
to take everybody else's stuff into consideration.
I mean, yeah, that's obvious, and I wouldn't encourage anyone to take it into consideration. It's just a stupid fan project I made. I mean, sure, it's big, and I think it's the biggest one. I think it's about the same size as ICP in the sheer terms of cards produced, at least in skirmish. In campaign, it's bigger.
I think so, but I
But
think it took us 5 years to get there, and it took you about
well, you also have
six
to deal with
months.
like community approval and stuff like that.
Yeah, so we
Uh,
can't just put out 100 cards in a single go.
yeah, and then just say lol.
Um, but okay, let's keep talking about the rest of the faction. So those are the two main droids. We've got a lot of other
Yeah.
different droids. I think the other important droid that we talked about was Kalani.
Yep, he used to be not named as just the super tactical droid, and now he's Kalani because he was taken in pairs. Which, if you look at his 8 point cost, I mean, what do you mean he's taken in pairs? Because this is a basically a Jabba, for a little bit of a more aggressive Jabba. He's uh, meant for kind of murdering stuff, more so than Jabba giving you the extra points and kind of more utility. And if you read him there, he's got four really excellent high quality special actions that each give buffs to anywhere you are. So he just kind of sits in the back and buff stuff. And people were taking him in pairs, bringing a 24-point army and 2 super tactical droids. So we had to make him unique.
Which shows how strong he was for 8. I mean, the 4 actions he has are he lets another Confederate droid interrupt to perform an attack. He can draw a command card. He can distribute 4 movement points between Confederate droids. That's what he did when I played him, and he was not unique. And then for 1 action, he can focus up to 2 other droids anywhere on the map.
Yeah.
So, it for an 8-point deployment, you're still able to either have another figure move and attack, or you can, when that doesn't matter in the early game, you're drawing a command card and giving out 2 focus tokens. So he was super efficient
Yeah.
in terms of compared to Jabba, who, in order to get an attack with Jabba, you have to spend 2 actions, so he can't be drawing cards or doing anything else, and also 2 VPs to do that. Same for moving him; it's part of that double action. So um,
Yeah.
it worked. It worked, and it made sense. I totally see what you're saying though. Like, this looks like a support figure, and normally support figures you don't want to overload them in their skirmish army because then you're low on attackers. But he's kind of like
Yeah, it
Palpatine,
worked. Mm,
works
yeah.
like an attacker.
He also used to have a very low health total. I think he was originally printed at 7, and then he got buffed to 8 um, to kind of encourage your opponent to run up and sack him in the back,
Hmm.
or something with lie in ambush. Um, and that didn't happen. So there was no counterforce from your opponent that I was kind of balancing on.
All right, and then let's talk about Grievous because I know he was a big part of the droid army and he has changed a little bit.
Yeah, he used to do some really weird stuff that we won't talk about. Now he is a kind of weird attacker. Um, you know what? Yeah, he, he's in a weird spot because he's like half a support, he's half an attacker, and then he's like he's got this like weird debuff thing that doesn't really matter in skirmish. It does matter in campaign, but in skirmish it's basically doesn't do anything. May as well be blank. Um, but why don't you give him a read?
Oh, sorry, I was muted that whole time I was reading that. So let me start again. He is a 14-point leader brawler. He has 16 health, 3 dice melee attack, and importantly, he's got cleave 2 damage for double surge, and then 3 special actions. Whirling Death, perform an attack against each hostile figure adjacent to you in any order. Then move special action gloat, move up to 2 spaces. Each hostile figure with more damage suffered than you within 4 spaces becomes weakened. And then the third special action is General of Droids, ready a friendly Confederate droid group.
Yeah, he now that he readies, he used to hand out a lot of focuses and free attacks, and he was broken with the B1s. So now he just readies a friendly Confederate droid group. We haven't seen him played in this iteration of him, unfortunately, but yeah, hopefully he's fine and not busted. But one thing that we have not seen from people is trying to exploit the whirling death with stuff like what is it, Dark Surge and largely just that one to, and I guess you could also run force push to try and push people in to get something stupid like 4 attacks off of a single action, being a 5-speed uh, attacker that can reasonably put out 12 dice of attacks in a single action if your opponent kind of clumps up a little bit.
Yeah, those
It's like
abilities.
brutality plus.
Yeah, they're kind of feast or famine. They're probably really good in this particular meta where there's a lot more generic stuff. But we found
Yeah,
that when we try to make stuff, if we ever when we put brutality on something, it's like either it's okay or it sucks because there's hardly ever opportunities to like get into a crowd to use it. It's usually like
yeah.
you're able to
People do
get,
a really good job with spacing their stuff out.
yeah, and then it's like you're able to get your melee figure within adjacent to one of their figures, and like brutality is tough to use that way. So
Yeah, although with a five point figure, oh, sorry, 5 speed figure, it's not insane to do so. Although he's not a force user, so he doesn't have access to stuff like Dark Surge himself. He needs a buddy to set it up for him,
yeah, it does certainly help too that he's got 16 health and 2 defense dice,
or
so
Dark Energy.
he can
Yeah,
tank a couple of
it's
hits
Dark Energy.
as he
I'm
gets
calling
in.
Dark Surge.
Yeah, dark energy. Okay, for CIS, we were going to talk about the force users next. So you were talking about how they kind of have pretty low defensive. Their defenses, they're pretty offensively focused.
They're all well, they're all very aggressive. I mean, they're all Sith, minus of course Grievous, but he's not even a force user. But they've all got relatively poor defenses, and it all comes for a very, very good offense. I mean, you look at Darth Sidious here. He's got Inherent Pierce 3, 3 die attacker, 5 speed. He's got brutality and twin sabers to re-roll a whole bunch of stuff, or re-roll a dodge, or re-roll your crappy attack roll. You can do it twice. And if you're out of range, well, you got that force lightning to do a whole bunch of extra damage at range. Damage, damage, damage. Um, and that is uh, well, Sidious is of course the epitome of that kind of one way force through kind of design. But Maul has a little bit of Maul has a similar idea, although he also serves as kind of a like an area denial with this prey. No, sorry, with the seize opportunity there. If someone walks next to him but doesn't attack you, uh, that he stuns that person, and he has a command card that would let him immediately attack him as well. But he also has brutality there. He's a little bit better defensively because he has that inherent evade. Um, and he also gets focused. Not particularly often, but if you have a lot of conditions going out, then
Does
you can
this?
focus him
I forgot.
decently enough.
Does this maul work with the dark saber attachment?
No, no, there's no.
Because it's a
The
different name,
There's
right?
not. It's a different name, and the card there's a card that lets there's a skirmish upgrade called of many talents that allows uh, people that appear in both eras to use each other's command cards. For example, Obi-Wan Kenobi could use both the Rebel Kenobi one, I Must Go Alone, as I think what it's called, as well as Clone Wars Kenobi's So Uncivilized, which lets him make a range attack. Um, but that only affects command cards, not skirmish upgrades. So,
Okay.
yeah,
But Maul's
yeah,
command card is tied to his other deployments, so
yeah. Yeah, Wreak Vengeance only works with dual bladed Fury, so it doesn't work. Maul, this Darth Maul's would work on the on Scum Maul,
yeah, I'm trying to bring it up.
but it's a little bit harder to do so. The Scum Maul doesn't have as easy access to harmful conditions.
Let's see. I'm trying to bring up the command card for Maul.
Yeah, it's called uh, Exploit Opportunity, I think, or Exploit Opening. Yeah, that's what it is.
Oh, it's small. I can't zoom in. Using a figure with a harmful condition declares an
Uh-huh.
attack against you, or when you stun a figure with seize opportunity, interrupt a form attack targeting that figure. I see. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think we talked about the seize opportunity of like, was this is for campaign also, right?
Yeah, yeah, it works in campaign, and it works much better in campaign because often you have like these movement things where okay, we need to go through this hallway. So if you just put Maul in just the right spot
Hmm.
where he can project an aura of you can't walk here, so they've got to either like spend a whole bunch of movement or they got to try and kill Maul to get past him, or they got to try and kill Maul, which is not the easiest thing to do, or they have to deal with the stun, which is never the right idea, or they got to like stop before it and like waste four spaces of movement or something like that. In skirmish, it matters less because there's not like a okay, we need to go to this objective at this point on this round. Um,
Yeah, in
Things going on.
in campaign, it often gets to the point where the heroes have to get the thing done before the time runs out, and they just have to stop killing figures and pushing past them. And at that point, when that happens, Maul is pretty amazing as a roadblock. It looks like, but in
Yeah,
skirmish, your figures are the opponent's objective, for the most part. Killing the figures is the objective. It gets you, killing Darth Maul will get you just as many victory points as controlling two or three objectives would. So it's probably less useful or less relevant there. But that
it is.
happens. I just think it's
Yeah, I mean
interesting to
they're
call
built for
out.
both.
Uh, yeah, I think it's interesting to call out when you can have the same design on a card, but it plays so differently in campaign versus how it plays in skirmish, just because how different they are.
I mean,
Um,
a design is only as good as you can leverage it within its environment. There's
yep,
nothing that exists in a vacuum.
yep.
Uh,
Um, want to. Oh, and then the. I don't think we talked about these last time, but the Magna Guards are very similar. Um, but these ones are actually a little more
ah,
relevant. They're where is it? No, the whirling staff. The hostile figures treat spaces
yeah.
adjacent to you as difficult terrain. Um,
Yeah, this was one of the original cards spoiled. So if you watch that spoiled video that you did some months ago, then you might recognize these guys.
yeah, did anybody play these in the tournament?
Uh, I think they were played once. Um, I know I played against them outside of the tournament a few times, and they were solid there. But I'm pretty sure they were only played once in the tournament. Um, I'm not entirely sure why. They might just be too high costed because, of course, these guys echo the Royal Guards, and I know the Royal Guards have a IACP version of them that I believe is cheaper. I don't entirely remember. Um,
Yeah, it's nine. They're nine
and
points.
yeah, okay, well, maybe it's just that they don't stack up to the Royal Guards, of which they were meant to echo. Where, of course, in campaign, where the Royal Guards are still their FFG version coming out of the core set, that they do. Uh, and of course, in campaign, they also have that whirling staff matters a lot more because of this same kind of idea as Maul of you got to get past something, and the Magna Guards do not let you get past.
So you know what I think though? I think that with Maul, because his ability says if you end your activation or you end your movement. Oh, come on, it's
Yeah,
not loading.
it's end your turn. So
So I think that's why it can be a little bit different. But because like if you end right next to an objective or something, and now I have to reload this. But the Magna Guards I can see being way more relevant in skirmish, where the Magna Guards themselves might be a lower priority target to the opponent, and in order to get to the figure they really want to get to, like their I don't know 12-point figure that's damaged and hasn't activated that round yet, the the Magna Guards will stop them or make it harder for them to get to that. Um,
yeah, they've also just got Sentinel, which makes it really hard to kill the stuff next to them. They can very easily stand in front of whatever they're trying to protect, and getting around it, it's going to be next to impossible. And that Frick Alloy there that reduces the pierce of melee attacks by three, which for the perceptive among you, three is the amount that a lightsaber does, means that they will not be getting munched on quite as much by well, much of anything as compared to when up against a lightsaber wielder.
yeah, I like that you made it melee attack specifically and not just all pierce. I like that, and Yeah, whirling staff. I have been trying to get an ability effect like that into skirmish for a while now in ICP. I haven't gotten it in yet, but hopefully in a later season we'll see something. I'd love to get an ability like that where a figure can actually block off a whole area just by standing
Yeah.
there. I think that's really cool.
Well, they're actually getting a slight touch up to that ability, making it just costing a movement point rather than being difficult terrain. Because we had some instances on Waska where watch your step, where oh yeah, suddenly if you walk into these guys, it doesn't cost you extra; it just costs you a strain, which was quite strange. So they're getting a little bit of a change there to
Yeah,
make it not weird on Waska.
interacts kind of weirdly with efficient travel too.
Yeah, yeah. So they're getting a more universal ability.
So there's a lot of random stuff in here. I don't mean that like badly. It's just like like
Yeah.
there's some real interesting offbeat stuff that like all these different droids, the assassin, the this crab droid, the octopuras, the oh there's the crab droid. There's so many crab droids. This is the STK forest
Yeah, there are three.
with the robots. They do have I guess we should have talked about the OOM. Pretty much a
Uh,
reskin of the Imperial officer, right?
it's close. They have a slightly different attack die. They have green blue instead of what is it, blue yellow, I think, and then they roll a
Yep.
black die instead of a white die. But it's basically the same. They're also a droid for
Was
your
this
droid stuff.
was this designed for campaign as well, or was this
Yeah, it's identical.
yeah,
Well, obviously, it's using the campaign version of the officer that gets you a whole move instead of just two movement points. But yeah, it's identical.
got it. Yeah, I just think that's cool when like you just were like we need this thing to fill this hole in this faction and just tweak it a little bit and this thing that already exists can already work. I mean, you
Yeah,
don't want to do that
yeah,
too much because then you just end up with a faction that feels like another faction, but it's cool to see it get translated into a different faction's colors. Um,
yeah. And I feel like the OOM doesn't really need to feel all that different as compared to something like the clone troopers and the stormtroopers.
yeah,
Where the OOM doesn't is more of a support thing that can just kind of sit in the back and isn't really a I don't want to say isn't a player, but like isn't a major factor in how things look.
are there any other figures in here that are major factors? Should we talk about the B2 or Count Dooku or anything?
Uh, I mean, obviously there's plenty of stuff in here. The CIS definitely saw a lot more play, and a lot more interesting things came out of it. I'm very surprised that the B2 actually saw zero play. The
Hmm.
Elite B2. I am absurdly surprised, and in fact, I think I'm nerfing them in the release just because of how strong that they were, and yet nobody played them. Um, but
Yeah, I'm just looking at it because
I don't know why.
I had to read it again. I mean, Speed 3 is a big deal.
Yeah, people look at that and then ignore everything else that they are health 10 with a pretty decent attack pool that comes out with a second body, so it takes a minimum of 2 attacks. Even if you do 100 damage on your first attack, you still need a second one. When, let's be honest, that'll be 3 actions for a 4-point figure to kill. That's not bad. If you want to control an objective, if you want to be on Tarkin and grab one of those special weapons, so you're suddenly rolling with 3 dice, or uh, anything like that, or just walk up in someone's face and shoot them with green red with Tarcom.
That mechanic is pretty cool, having it deploy a different deployment card that you keep in reserve. Replace it with a B2 torso figure. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean
If
it's
any of you ever played Republic Commando, it's straight out of there.
they just really don't die.
That's
They're
right.
very hard to kill. Um, let's see, was there any? Trying to think if there's any skirmish upgrades we need to talk about,
I
but we kind of said
don't think
that there's nothing specific to CIS, right?
no,
Yeah.
they're all. I don't want to say they're all relatively generic, but they aren't. super special.
They're all kind of like add-ons to specific cards. Like I see OOM has its
Yeah.
own add-on, the B2 has an add-on, the BX has the personal shield, the tactical droids has the network command, etc. This looks like it's for the.
Yeah.
Oh no, this is for
MTT.
multi-transport. Multi-troop transport. Well, yeah, it's
Yeah,
specific.
lets them actually transport a guy rather than just respawning your B1s,
Oh, I see.
which was a group we didn't talk about, but the MTT lets you respawn B1s.
I think this is where. So now I'm looking at all the Confederate stuff. This is where like there's so much creativity here. There's so many ideas that I remember when I looked at CIS, when I was looking at it for the first time, I was like, this, I am overwhelmed. But once you, if you take some time and just sit down and kind of start looking at them one at a time, which is what I ended up started doing. I ended up just like, okay, I'm gonna look at a couple more cards today, and then I looked at them and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take a break and I'll come back tomorrow and look at a couple more cards, and that really helped me with kind of absorbing everything. But there's so many cool little designs that are like very evocative. I remember only a couple weeks ago, I feel like I saw the where is it, the Octopuras saying "You are not small," and I just got a kick out of
Yeah.
that text because it's
Well,
like,
because
what does this
it's a
mean?
1-by-1 figure that's massive, and that doesn't really play well
Yeah,
if you happen to be small and massive, because then suddenly a massive figure can stomp on another massive figure, but and can see through each other. It gets weird. So,
right. Because in the
um,
rules, massive is correlated with having a multiple space figure base. Um,
well, that's not entirely true. Having multiple figures makes you large,
right. That's what I
but
mean. But
massive is just a trait. Yeah,
in most of the
but
rules, it's
all of the massive ones are large, so
it's
they kind of build on top of each other.
and it's written out that like a massive figure can end its base on a small figure, and then that small
Yeah,
figure gets pushed. It doesn't say a non-massive figure because normally
yeah,
large being a large figure and a massive figure is linked just by the ones they made, but not necessarily like you can have that. So yeah, I just thought that was neat. Also, there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with being massive, even though you're not
yeah.
large. So yeah, I thought that was fun. Um, just yeah, a lot of cool stuff that people should look at and check out. Your Dooku, I think we mentioned last time, I talked about how well you captured the essence of a duelist who is specifically good at fighting in melee combat and fighting against other melee combatants.
Yeah, I mean maybe, but you need a PhD to play them. Uh, I'm still not proud of that text box. How small it is, or how small the text is to
Yeah,
fit it all.
some
But I mean, unfortunately, like I've spent a lot of time on it, and I think that's just the right way to do it.
I
I mean, I
mean
could remove some of the surge abilities, but I don't think that's right either.
sometimes it helps to just take one of the abilities off, and it's like that we've ended up doing that for a lot of figures in our IACP. It's like this is so many abilities, and then like, wait, does it need this third ability? It's like, well, it doesn't. It could be okay without it. Like,
Yeah,
and I'm not trying to criticize what you're doing. Just as like a design note of like sometimes you find an ability that's on there that you will miss it so much if you let go of it or delete it, right? You're like, this ability's got so much flavor or it's so interesting, but then you look at it and sometimes you find an ability that it's like, if I took this third ability off the text box and I showed it to somebody, then and they had no idea that it was there, they wouldn't think it was missing anything. And that's when we kind of
yeah.
find our ways to save space on cards. But you've talked about how this project, you have the benefit of knowing that you're not going to be getting new players playing this, right?
Yeah, so I have a little bit of a higher bar for complex, or I guess a lower bar for complexity that I'm willing to deal with this project, just because people that are playing this have already played Imperial Assault. No one's first exposure to this is going to be their first exposure to IA. At least I hope so. and as such, I can get away with a little bit more complexity there. I don't want to say that it's a non-factor. It is, but I can do a little bit more when people are familiar with how Imperial Assault works. Like I can put in that clone squad, which is a really complex ability. Like if you think about it, it's huge. Like it turns one group into 7 different groups, and then if you include the that handpicked squad that we briefly mentioned, it turns them into I think I ran the numbers of it being about 40 something. It's a lot. Actually, no, 40 is way wrong. It's like 130 something.
Wow.
Um, and but with people that already know how to play IA, it's not that bad. They can handle it because they have that language already built into their brain that I can exploit.
Yeah. And plus, they've also probably, like, this is probably not even going to be their first, like, custom add-on extension they find. A lot of people are going to find this probably after they found the IACP or after they found other custom campaign content.
Well, I'd say this is in a realm of its own as compared to at least IACP. IACP does designs very well and echoes FFG very well and keeps their complexity down, which is something that is admirable, but it's just not right for this project.
Yeah, no.
Especially because sometimes like the faction identities need to get weird because they've already got the 3 main factions, which have pretty strong identities, and if they just kind of end up playing like something else, then they end up playing like something else. So you kind of need to get out there and do weird stuff to make them really feel different, which they do, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good way to design cards. If you so anybody who's designing their own stuff, do that. Be weird. Make stuff that has never been in the game before, and that maybe you don't even know how to write it out in the game's language, because that's the stuff that's unexplored design territory that is gonna feel different, and it's gonna make things stand out. It's also a good way to balance things, because we've learned that when you make too many of the same ability, people spam it and it becomes broken.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, all right. Anyway,
Okay,
Mercs.
yeah, let's go into Mercs. That's what I was about to say too. So you did release some mercenaries that we didn't get to talk about last time, so I'm glad we're doing this again.
Yeah. Well, there are a total of 4 mercenary cards. Well, 5 if you include the campaign version of CAD. And I guess 6 actually if you include the campaign version of Django, because he recently have his card split up. But
Yeah,
yeah,
let's hit all of these. Which one do you want to talk about first?
let's just start with the simplest one of Aura, just being well, real just kind of stat stick sniper that just does a whole lot of damage. She's a force user, by the way. A lot of people are confused by this, but Aura Singh is a force user. Um, just doesn't carry a lightsaber. And as such, she's a ranged force user that uses a sniper rifle. There has a very strong accuracy and has this neat hidden talent ability, which is something quite like the weak ways, where you can either reroll an attack die or a defense die when you make an attack. But it also works while you're defending. That you can reroll your defense die or you can reroll an opponent's attack die.
Yeah, so I mean, it is kind of ironic. We just talked about be weird and make cards with design space that we've not seen before. This one is pretty much by the books. These are two abilities that were already in the game. I think
Well, hidden
hidden
talent wasn't in
talent's
the
a
game. Yeah,
variation of, like you said, the weak ways.
the weak ways. Yeah.
But otherwise, this is like it's a force user hunter that is a ranged attacker that I think you talked about, gives you some um, trait overlap in especially Confederacy force user lists without being all melee, right?
Yeah, she actually fits in very well with a lot of the force user lists because she's a range attacker, so you're not confined to this kind of melee stuff. She works fine enough in Confederacy or the Republic, and she has a special command card. Sorry, not a command card, a skirmish upgrade that lets her once per game ignore the affiliation restriction on one of the command cards, so she can play something like Lure of the Dark Side once per game, or I don't know what's a light side like Force Push, or both.
Ah,
Actually, not both. Not both in the same game, but you could run both if you wanted.
yeah. And if you is it 1 point? Or 0 points?
Yeah, it's just a free thing that she gets. Of course, there's no skirmish upgrades or command cards in campaign, so she has no need of it on our campaign version.
Oh, is it a skirmish upgrade?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll look for it. But
It's a neutral.
oh, it's in neutral. Oh, right,
Yep.
that makes sense.
Order abandon there lets you take Ahsoka if you are mercenary.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know about that either.
Yeah, she loses her Padawan learner, which lets her copy the abilities of other Force users, and she gets her old Ahsoka version, I think, Vigor, from her Rebel version. Yeah. And the reason why it's a neutral is, of course, because you can import Aura into a lot of different factions. So I just want this to be able to follow her.
Right, just like how we had to make Darksaber neutral. The idea is
Yeah.
she is in a different faction. It lets her play different faction cards. Oh, you have to deplete it. Okay, yeah, so it's once per mission.
Yeah, it's once per game.
Okay, should we move on? Let's talk about Cad Bane. I had the
Sure.
quote unquote pleasure of playing against this card in my semifinals game, and he is quite
Well,
the
he's
dirty.
getting, yeah.
He's
He's getting definitely, I wouldn't say a full rework, but he's getting a few touch ups in the release. Um, and I mean, the thing is, Imperial Assault IACP already had a Cad Bane, so I started with kind of that, and then eventually evolved into this. And I'm very happy with where he is. What he does is that when he attacks, if the target he'll do two different things depending on if the target is readied or the target's exhausted. Both to do with command cards. Uh, and if the target is readied, you will look at a random command card in your opponent's hand, and then if you want, you can discard one of your cards to discard that card. So if you can get rid of like a fleet-footed or something garbage to get rid of like a Lure of the Dark Side, if you happen to get lucky. But if the target is exhausted and has already done his thing, when you declare the attack, you don't even need to do damage. You just need to declare it. Uh, then it counts as being under your control for the purpose of control. So you can block someone's terminal, you can steal objectives from them. Those are the real two things that I've seen done. It's a real neat kind of utility figure, and that's something I'm very happy with. Is that he's a true utility, but not a support, which I believe is a unique uh, kind of thing. I don't think that really comes through in any other card that isn't really an attacker, that isn't an objective grabber, is a true utility kind of person. And a second ability there, quicker draw. Once per mission, at the start of the round, you can activate him. That will eventually be going to that you if you don't have the initiative, you can activate him. Um,
yeah, that makes sense. It's pretty
but
brutal when you can do that and then activate with the initiative.
yeah, so he gets to get the jump on you and do his stuff. I'm also very huge fan of his command card there, although it didn't get played very much. Cruel Ultimatum,
Oh yeah, we did see that.
which
I did see that in the final.
yeah, he the- there it was played a few times, and all the times to pretty solid effect. Where if you pull it up, it forces your opponent to make a choice of three really bad things. Uh, and
See if I can make
yeah,
it bigger.
it's seen play. The opponent can choose to either end his turn when he plays the card, when he activates. So you just skip someone's activation, super stun, or a figure other than the activating figure just takes 5 damage. So if you have like an Obi-Wan Kenobi or a Mace Windu there with 5 health left, then you can't really choose that unless he just dies straight up, which sucks. Or you give your opponent the choice to ready any one of their groups, which also sucks. Uh, Usually, these modal cards tend to suck when your opponent chooses because they just choose whatever is bad for you, whatever one is the worst. But there have been a lot of times where all of the options tend to suck a huge amount. So even the least sucky one is still pretty good, and usually worth that 3 point card.
Yeah, I think you did a good job finding the options that are always going to be on and rarely ever bad. 5 damage is a lot. Usually will end up killing something. Um, Ready a friendly group. Normally that would be the one that would be like the most risky, because if you don't have any exhausted groups, they would choose that one. But you get to choose when the card gets played, of course, so you don't have to worry about
Yep.
that. The only weird thing about this card is the confusion about who chooses the figure to suffer the damage that I found.
Yeah, it'll be clearer in the next iteration. I've done up the wording a little bit better.
Yeah, that's good.
But there have been, I think, 2 instances of people not really knowing how the card works. So I've had to go back and clean it up.
Yeah, the name's a cool reference too. Um,
I don't know what it's referencing, but
oh,
sure, I'll take it.
it's a very iconic Magic card.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. I thought that might be what you're getting at, but I don't really see how it's a reference. But yeah, it's
Because it's Cruel
yeah,
Ultimatum.
nickel bolt. Ah, lovely card.
Cruel Ultimatum, you. Of course, with the Magic
Yeah,
card, you do all of them. But anyway, what was I
yeah,
gonna
fair
say?
enough.
I like that. So you
The way
mentioned
this is the
how,
magic podcast,
huh?
doesn't matter.
No, no. I like how your Cad Bane is. You kind of went in on the character traits to inform it, whereas so that's like top down design. At least that's what they call it in Magic. Is going from the creative source and putting it on the card. At least I think so. Although you did mention you were designing it to be more
Yep.
of utility based.
No, I mean it was a top down. All of these cards were top down designs.
Yeah.
Every single one. All of the well, actually, yes, all of the cards were top down. Um, to use a magic term, which I think is just a regular design term now. But
Yeah.
yeah,
And well, Cad Bane for the ICP was not is actually bottom up design. If you, I won't bring it up, but Cad Bane and IACP ended up being a how can we create a leader for hunters that like supports other hunter figures without just giving them more damage, and then how can we make a self-focusing figure that players will still want to target with focus. So those two like abstract game concepts ended up being represented on the Cad Bane card. So it's not as top, but it's definitely not as top down as the character informing the card. So yeah, I thought that was cool.
yeah. And like I mentioned, I do think that it occupies a very cool design space of that kind of utility but not support uh, thing, which, like I said, I don't think shows up anywhere else. As especially like being played, he saw actually a lot of play in the tournament
Hmm.
uh, for being a figure that doesn't really fit into the normal taxonomy of your figures.
Yeah, he was quite strong, I thought.
Yeah.
All right, Dirge. This will be an interesting one. Where did we end up with Dirge? Let's see. If you are not defeated,
Well,
you are not defeated when you suffer damage equal to your health. The first time you suffer damage equal to your health, you award VPs as if you were defeated. When you declare an attack, if you have suffered 10 damage, remove one attack die from your attack pool. And he has regenerate, so every turn he gets to recover 2 damage. I think that's
yep.
different than yeah, where you first started, where he left the battlefield, right? Or he when he was defeated.
Yes. So originally Dirge, when you so let's just yeah. So Dirge, he's a 6 point attacker. Doesn't really have anything special. He has regenerate on him, but his main ability is unkillable, which makes him unkillable. So when he would die, what this used to happen, he would leave the battlefield, and depending on how much excess damage you did to him above his total, the damage required to kill him, he would take some number of rounds to come back, and that worked fine for campaign. The thing is, in
Hmm.
skirmish though, games last maybe 3 to 4 rounds.
Yep.
Sometimes it's two, and so it basically becomes no factor. And as such, it became this kind of unkillable thing where or that he doesn't die when he gets to 0 health, although he can still be killed buy things that automatically defeat, such as Mando's um, blaster, disruptor, I think is what it's called, um, or
Oh
the
yeah,
snowtroopers, the
yeah,
ICP
yeah.
snowtroopers.
The disruptor rifle.
Can still be killed by those. That he just kind of sticks around and still shooting, although he's weaker. But every round, he does a little bit extra back, and he's suddenly attacking at full strength again. So you need to do another. I mean, it just a regular moron can do it, but um, can just needs to do a little bit of damage to be a consistent thorn in the side. Although he is going to get changed to not count for control when he's at 10 health or 10 damage,
Oh, that's a good idea.
because yeah, nobody caught that. Nobody did anything about that, but I am going to, largely for the campaign side. But I'm sure it'll have effects in skirmish as well.
Well, it looks like, yeah, I think this looks like you found a good design for this to make him feel immortal, but not make it broken.
Yeah, which is honestly quite surprising to have a figure that you cannot kill and yet seems to be fine. Especially if one that is, I don't want to say relatively boring, but just he's a guy that walks and attacks.
Yep.
That's it. That's all he does. No special actions, no special attack rules. Just walk up, bang. That's it.
Hmm. All right, and then finally we've got the Fett father, Jango Fett.
Yep.
So Django is an interesting one too because I remember playing against it before it got changed to this, but currently he's 8 points for a hunter vehicle. He's got Boba defenses, so +1 block, +1 evade with a black dice, which makes sense because they're wearing the same armor. And then he can either perform 2 attacks, which is blue, green, yellow, with strafe, and it says after the attack resolves, you may move up to 2 spaces. Oh, it says perform an attack. After attack resolves, move to 2 spaces. Then you perform an attack. So it's very specified that how the order you do things. You attack, move 2 spaces, then attack. And then collect bounty lets him perform a focused attack that removes a defense die, and after it resolves, it's only targeting the figure with the highest figure cost, and after it resolves, if the target was defeated, you get 3 extra VPs and become focused.
Yeah. That'll
Yeah.
probably get changed to be uniques rather than a figure with the highest figure cost. We've seen a couple of times where it's been difficult to use that collect bounty on the target that you actually want to, and also people just using it and forgetting that it has to target when you have like a random Kenobi or Mace Windu on the opposite side of the board that is preventing you from collecting on this 8 point figure.
It'll certainly lower the word count as well. Just looking at figure with the
Yeah,
highest figure cost among
yeah,
that figure's army. Yeah. So originally though he was like, oh, he's 6 speed as well. Originally, what
yeah,
was he doing? He had like flyby and
yeah.
rapid fire.
He had flyby. He was able to do the 2 attacks, so it'd be the same kind of thing as strafe, and he only had green yellow, so that was kind of built into his stat line, the strafe and the flyby thing. But the biggest thing that made him broke was he also had anti-pierce on him. He had 3 points of anti-pierce,
Hmm.
um, in addition to however what was defenses work. Means his damage output was really good, and you could be very very reckless with him because he was basically invincible, being a 10 health figure that had +1/+1 and anti-pierce.
I don't remember the anti-pierce, but
And it had pretty good damage output.
I do remember when Wesley played him against me, and from like a full movement away, he moved 6, and then he did the rapid fire, and then because of the way flyby works, he got 4 movement points at the end of his 2 attacks, and then he flew away 5 spaces back behind a wall. And I was like,
Yeah,
well, what am I supposed to do? Also, I think he
and
wasn't a
that's why
vehicle.
he no longer works like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he originally wasn't a vehicle. Same thing with the jetpack troopers, which I don't think we talked about. But I don't believe that jetpack users should be classified as vehicles. So originally I didn't. Although midway through the tournament, I decided to update them to vehicles, if only for parity's sake. Um, I still don't think they should be vehicles, but that's what the precedent is. So
Yeah, it gives some nice trait
jetpack troopers,
synergy
which is
with.
a type of clone trooper, not just a.
Yeah, the
as a
jetpack
squad
clone
member. So,
troopers. But yeah, FFG kind of
yeah.
set that baseline with the jet troopers from Jabba's realm, and then Sabine from Tyrants of Lothal, both being vehicles, and so they play well with a lot of the vehicle command cards together. So I think that's just good for list building too. And that's it for
Oh,
mercenaries. Um, there were some neutral cards I wanted to talk about. If I can
yes.
find them.
The neutral card. I mean,
Okay,
there are two that are worth it, but
yeah, let's talk about
the
choreographed war. Is this the
yeah.
one?
So there were originally
Yeah.
yes. So this, you know, why don't you just read it
Oh, sure. Okay,
and I'll
so
talk about it.
1 point skirmish upgrade. You can only include it if your affiliation is Republic or CIS. Exhaust this card during a figure's activation. That figure gains 1 movement point. And then, while exhausted, an opponent may ready this card during a figure's activation for that figure to gain 1 movement point. So, the opponent can use it if you have already used it that round.
Yep. So this was a cycle of cards. It was originally 3 cards, although one of which was removed because it was not fun to play against. Um, to represent Palpatine's meddling, and we also have a Imperial class deck that is of the same vein of Palpatine's screwery in the war, and this was one of the cards that was originally in the class deck that I cleanly ripped and put it into the campaign. Oh, sorry, into the skirmish because it was good and people liked it. So now we have this. Um, yeah, it's a people have enjoyed it and have gotten like really creative with it as well. Like we've seen it used with the assault troopers that normally cost double actions to make their attack. We've seen it used with well, basically anything that likes having 2 actions or doesn't like to move. Um, and it's also like this weird mind game with your opponents. Like, all right, am I going to get more value out of it than you? And generally, the answer is yes, but not always. But not always. Especially like when you want to use it, because if you're out activated and passing and stuff like that, like if you have the last activation around and you can use it without a cost,
Yeah,
it's a weird
especially
mind game.
there's a lot of figures in this expansion that have assault, and it's really good with assault.
Yep.
So the droidecas, so a lot of the Jedi's have assault. The like you said, the
Two, but okay.
assault troopers, Anakin and Yoda, right?
Yeah.
Which is
Anyway, it doesn't matter.
more more melee figures than the base game or IACP that I think I've ever had assault. So
Fair
it
enough.
stands out to me as somebody who's like always taking stock of what's in the game. Um,
No.
and like you said, there's the interesting mind game. When I first played it, I remember I was like, okay, so I want to use this on my last activation when I have last activation in the round, so that my opponent can't use it. And then later on, I was like, oh well, wait a second. If my opponent uses it, then it readies and I get to use it again. So maybe I do want to try
Yeah.
and tempt them to use it so I can get, because my list is built around it and their list isn't, and so on. And yeah, it's a really cool design. I thought this one was really cool.
Yeah.
Very
And
very flavorful to the Clone Wars specifically as well, even though it doesn't. It's a very simple effect.
yeah, I'm really happy with it. Honestly, I think this is my best designed card out of the entire set. Um, and I am very happy that people enjoyed it and played it. And yeah, it's good.
It's laudable when you can be have an elegant design that is also super flavorful. Like that's the holy grail of card design.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, so
I mean,
really
not just card design, but just design in general of like, and not even game design, just
game
all
design.
forms of design. Like this is beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, this is
Not
great.
to toot my own horn too
You're
much,
tooting a
but
little bit there, but no, it's a really good one.
yeah, maybe.
um, I think that was it for the stuff we wanted to talk about in
Yeah,
this.
I mean,
So,
A lot of the neutral skirmish upgrades are kind of like these fixed cards that to just kind of add an extra 2 factions to the game, especially if of a different era. Like we talked about that of many talents.
I was curious about End of an Era. Is this getting reworked? Because I don't think I saw anybody playing it.
Nobody played it, and it's probably not going to get a rework. It might get a tiny buff, but it probably won't. For those that are listening, it's a 3-point skirmish upgrade, most expensive in the game. Well, except of course Brothers in All But Blood, which is 10 points. But and it is in the same cycle as the choreographed war, so you can only include it if you are Republic or the CIS, and you have to include 3 fewer points worth of command cards in your deck. Like a reverse, what is it? Balance of the Force, I think is the one
Yep.
there. Yeah, and you can deplete it at the start of any round to take control permanently of any one of your opponent's non-unique groups, assuming they survive. Um, but at the start of the next round, you lose immediately. So it's a very weird kind of card that, like, all right. I mean, it if you look at the art, it's Cody getting Order 66, and that's what the card does. It lets you Order 66 your opponent um, at the cost of if you don't do it right, the Jedi come in and arrest you without Anakin there to save you, um, and you lose. The thing is that that's a very dangerous card, so it's a very flavorful effect. I like it, but I don't want to buff it because if it's good, there's these difficult designs, and largely this one and Brothers in All But Blood, as if they were good, not like good isn't solid, but good isn't like, yeah, I'm gonna play this very, very solidly on in a lot of lists. Then they become toxic, but if they don't exist as a regular part of the meta, then they aren't toxic. And it's a really weird line to draw because when you think, oh, isn't a toxic thing toxic? And generally, yes, but there are sometimes like these things that can generate either negative play experience with this by having your group stolen and then murders you with it when someone's on the ropes, or about to do something and then oh your opponent gets a lucky dodge and then you immediately lose, or in the case of Brothers in All But Blood, just having one list. There's only one Brothers list. There's the same problem with Spectre Cell of it's it's the one list. So if it's too good, then the amount of variety drops a whole lot, and it can be a problem in large amounts, but in small amounts is actually fine. And that's why I'm hesitant to buff it, because it's not that I don't want it to be played; it's that I don't want it to be like really good
Good. You don't want it to be
and
good.
like unbalanced good, but just like, yeah, good. I want it to be solid, not good. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I was gonna say this feels like this is something that I call like wall art design. It's something that you want to frame it and you want to show it to people and be like, this has perfectly captured the concept of Order 66 in card form. If Order 66 was to happen in a skirmish game, this is how it would read in text. Like, perfectly.
Oh, you make me sound like a one of those art
But,
nerds.
but, you've made it so that nobody really wants to play it in their list if they're looking to win the game because of
Well, I mean,
the cost up front. The cost is so high. It's 3 points plus 3 command points.
yes, it is a very high cost, and it has seen play. Not in the tournament. It has not seen any play in the tournament, but it has seen a couple play in like in the off games that I've played with people and just people playing games themselves. It has seen a little bit of play there, and it's in those games. It's performed okay, not great, but it's been fine, and that's the place where I kind of want to keep it as being like a fine off meta, but not, still like okay kind of
Also, wait,
thing.
how does it perform okay? It either wins you the game or it loses you the game. It is by that very nature, as you
Because sometimes
said.
it wins you the game.
Sometimes it wins and
Because
sometimes it loses. Okay.
yeah, where like an extra squad, like up where an extra 3 points wouldn't um,
Right.
have won you the game. because sometimes it lets you steal something really good, like Galactic Marines or like a 9-point group, and you can kind of play around it, like by not shooting their big scary 9-point, 10-point group if it's non-unique, and then steal it later in the game. It
Mm.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird card. And it probably, like, if I want it to be good, I could buff it, but I just don't want to risk over buffing it, and then suddenly it becomes a real nightmare for everybody.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I get what you're saying about like it should not be a centerpiece of the meta. It belongs off to the side on the fringes for like it's for fun. It's not for winning tournaments. It's for fun,
I
right?
I don't want to go that far. Like, I don't want
Okay.
to say no, it's just for fun kind of thing, because I still believe that it serves a place in the meta, and that's
Mm.
something that I
Okay.
actually disagree with a lot of designers on. That there's all of the stuff should have a place. Whether or not it's the strongest place is another thing, but everything should exist, in there. Otherwise, you may as well have just not printed the card.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, but uh, that doesn't mean that everything needs to be top tier. It can just be a solid B tier, and often a B tier is still fine. Like, yeah, sure, it might only show up in 10%, but it can still take some games off of like the top tier A tier lists, um, just by coming off with something that's a little bit off the beaten path, and it's still just fine. It's just not super good that you will see all the time.
Cool. Well, I'm glad to hear that perspective on it. It's it's definitely not something I see when I read it, but hearing your perspective on it is really interesting on that card because it's a type of card we don't see a lot of in the other either the base game or even IACP. So cool, really cool to hear your take on what is the designer intent behind it.
Yeah,
So do we want to talk about the tournament real quick and then
yeah,
getting
sure.
pretty long. So we you did organize a tournament. I don't know if we talked about this time, but there was a tournament that you put together. You came and contacted the IACP. Oh, I think you reached out to me and you're like, "Is it cool if we run a playtest
Yeah, I reached
tournament?"
to you
Right?
first.
Huh?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was great. I mean, we wouldn't have mind either way, but I'm opening up the roll better just so we can look at the rounds. And we're like, sure, we're between seasons, so like go ahead and you organized this whole tournament. You reached out to people. You put up money for the winners and people who did well, and I
Yep.
thought that was really impressive because normally we see all these custom content people come and go. They're like, look at this thing I made in Kensei in 20 minutes. Isn't it cool? Isn't it awesome? Aren't I great at this? This is so easy. No work put in, no like testing or anything like that, but
Yeah.
you're going the full mile and a half with this set with the playtesting, which is super impressive.
I mean, it's the 80-20-20 rule of the 80% of the product comes out with 20% of the work. It's the other 80% that gets it over the finish line there. And I mean, I'm still well into that 80% of work, um, where a lot of people stop with that kind of 20%. All right, look at this mostly finished thing, where this whole tournament was something that, like, I don't play skirmish very much, and internal playtesting is kind of meh at doing much of anything. It's not very good. Um,
Also, one
good data,
second,
that is.
I want to
So,
clarify to our listeners, any of you who are in the custom card disc channel in our Discord, I'm not talking about you. You guys talk a lot in there. I see it. I'm talking about people who are on like Reddit and Board Game Geek and stuff that aren't integrated into the community and actually looking for feedback, but just looking for validation. So you guys in the custom card channel, you're doing great job, great work in there. I'm not talking about you. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, here I am. So, oh, you guys don't know how to. No, yeah. I mean, there are definitely great designs in there, and the problem is just like following through. Like, it's hard, and it's a lot of work. And the great designs are great, and but a lot of people aren't professional designers, and don't like do this kind of stuff, and that's okay. You can do things for fun, uh, and often they'll go and spark an idea in someone else. They'll go and spark an idea in someone else, and then you get stuff like this. And like it's a valuable community you got there. But yeah, anyway, we put together this tournament. People played it. Ran well. It was supposed to run over 6 weeks, although there were some delays in the last game, so it was like 9 at the end. But
Yeah, people are lazy assholes.
yeah, yeah. I wonder who that would be.
They don't play their
Uh,
games when they're supposed to. I don't know what's wrong with people.
yeah, I
I
don't know.
apologize for our
Uh,
community.
yeah, do you?
Yeah, not personally, but on
And
behalf of the community.
of course not. Anyway, yeah, and we ran it. I put up some money, largely because I wasn't in the skirmish community beforehand. I played my first skirmish game, just trying to figure it out. So I didn't really know how this would be received. I wanted to get eyes on it, so I put up a little bit of money, not much, and people played it. People enjoyed it. I got what I was looking for out of it, which was really good data and eyes on it. Like there were changes almost every week that I had to make. Well, not almost every week, actually every week that I had to make to make it work and have people enjoy it. Fix the broken stuff, buff the weak stuff.
Yeah, I think you mentioned in our previous talk that like the expected reaction to something like this from a gaming community is usually like um, not suspicion, but what? Now I can't remember. Skepticism.
Like apprehension, like
Yeah.
keep it at arm's length, kind of. Oh, what's this? Does it smell bad? Yeah, probably.
But I think our community really took to it with just the player base that we have now is hungry for new content because obviously dead game, and then people are I think are really respect the playtesting method, at least in our community, because that's what we're all about. We're all about testing and making sure things are balanced through data. So when people saw, hey, you're doing the same thing we do, people, I think, really got on board. At least, uh, we're a pretty small community. There are dozens of us. So,
Yeah,
8 people is, a good chunk of our active player base, our active day-to-day player base. We've got about 20 people, I think, active total. So that play all the time, that play
sounds about right.
actively. We have more than that who are consuming our content and stuff like that. But
In
um,
in in skirmish, that is, of course.
yeah,
Of
it's the
course, if
skirmish
any of you
side.
play campaign, the campaign, I mean, an iteration of it is out and you can play it, and but you might want to wait a couple of months for the full campaign that I've done the reworks on and all the testing for.
So the last thing I kind of want to talk about, big thing, is what was it like before the tournament and before you got to see all these game logs of people playing your cards, and then after they played it? Because for me, there's that point, right, of you design the card, you think it's going to be played a certain way, you imagine the different ways people are going to play it, and then you put it out in the wild and you give it to people to play with, and then you get to see what it actually happens when people are playing with it. So what was that like, that transition?
Uh, I mean, the experience is amazing. I mean, sometimes you envision something as you would work it like this, and then it does, and you feel really good, and then it doesn't, or sometimes it doesn't, and then it's absolutely hilarious. Like we saw this list in the finals up against you with Wesley using a lion ambush wampa plus Cad Bane's ability to jump it on you, um, and with basically uh, no warning, which was hilarious. My God, I wish that worked better, but unfortunately, kids met bad matchup for that kind of strategy. But uh, it, it's really great just seeing people take stuff and actually do stuff because I mean, I don't want to say that's why all designers build stuff, but that's why at least I build stuff. Isn't just so that I can appreciate it myself. It's just you show it to other people. I mean, artists post their stuff on the internet all the time, and it's for the same reason, to be appreciated. And in games, that means in that you would have to play it. So seeing people play it, no matter how they play it, and getting weird ingenuity stuff out of it is really amazing, and also provides really really good data because, like you mentioned, you have these conceptions in your head of how things will work, and sometimes they do, and then a lot of the time they don't, and you need to either buff or nerf or just change it in one way or another to more accurately align what you're going for instead of what they ended up being.
I so when I played the tournament, I very much enjoyed doing my damnedest to break all the broken stuff that I could, like finding the stuff that was like very broken and showing how
Rocket launcher
overpowered
troopers.
it is. Yeah, 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 like spamming those rocket launcher troopers. Did the other players? Because I didn't look at all the logs yet. Did you find the other players, or I should say, that was mindset. Sometimes that was my mindset. Sometimes you get players who are just like, oh, like I'm gonna put these random things together and see what happens, but they're not really trying to break anything, or they're not, they're not in that super competitive mindset. Did you have like a mix of that, or did you see mostly people just trying to really be competitive and trying to break stuff and win?
I mean, the thing is that it's hard to tell as not only as a designer, but with all these new cards, because like maybe they're people are trying to look at stuff and say, oh, this combos with this and this goes with this, but and then it comes out that it's actually just jank and it doesn't work together because it's like too complex. Um, but then sometimes it comes out where all this kind of weird building actually comes out to work. Like, for example, Palantieri, who is the victor in the tournament. Um, he had a really weird list by the end of it, and not like weird as in it didn't work. It did, but it just didn't strike me, or for that matter, really anyone that I talked to, as being something that would work. Uh, but it did. It did its job wonderfully. And of course, he's a campaign player, so he came at it with a little bit of a different perspective, which was another really nice perspective to see. Um, but yeah, a lot of people, and a lot of the time, because of like the how I built the set, um, these kind of like flavorful, more fun lists often worked. Like, oh yeah, we're just gonna spam a bunch of B1 droids. That worked very well. In fact, a little bit too well early on in the tournament before they had to get hit with the nerf bat. Um, Same thing with Anakin Skywalker and brothers in all but blood. They worked very well in the start of the tournament before they had to get hit with the nerf and or rework bat. Um, Now, is that because they were trying to be competitive, or is that because they were just trying to run something fun? Oh yeah, let's bring these two together. Let's try this out. I don't know, and you have to ask them.
Yeah, that's true. I was just trying to look up Palantir's finals list where he had the Cad Bane, Django Octoparas, and a Scorpanek and a
Yep.
Droideka. Yeah, like that
Yep.
does kind of just look like a jank salad, but it worked really well. Uh,
Yeah, it did.
I think part of that was Cad Bane being really good, but it did work really well in
Oh,
that game, and he played it.
yeah, yeah. And you can watch that game as it was cast. I don't know when this is going to go up, but some time ago.
Yeah, it was 6 days ago. This is going up tomorrow. It was posted a
Yeah.
week ago, and my semifinals game as well.
Yeah. Although I think, did you cast that, or was that just in live stream
That
fashion?
was I live streamed it, but it's on the YouTubes.
Yeah, and you can watch that as well. I attended, didn't really say much, but I did. It
Oh yeah, you were there.
was a good game.
All
If
right.
you want to watch that Wampa thing that I was mentioning.
Yeah. Um, any other anything else to say about the tournament? How it went with the community?
Um, I mean, it went really well. Like it felt. I mean, you mentioned there was just like the uptake was there. Like I just kind of mentioned it, and then people were all on board, and that was really nice. Of course, I feel like I kind of forced that by putting up money and coming up with such a massive set that, unlike a lot of the one drip feed kind of cards, it just can't really be ignored. Um, but it was really nice community. I really appreciated it. It felt really good to play and have everyone like give the feedback, positive and negative feedback. Appreciate both. Um,
It was really nice to
yeah, I
digest it
mean,
as a community, by the way. Like, I remember I got much more into it once I saw other people were talking about things, and I could be like, "Oh yeah, that's interesting." Like, it was like we started to digest it as a hive mind instead of just trying to digest all those cards by yourself.
yeah,
Um,
I mean, you mentioned earlier how a lot of the Confederacy designs, in particular, felt kind of very dense and very complex, and having the community there to kind of help digest stuff seemed to help a lot of people, actually.
right. Um, I think we hit everything. Any closing thoughts and plans for the future too? We want to hear
Yeah.
what's coming up next for Jayjaxx Clone Wars expansion.
Well, I mentioned that I've actually got to kick this skirmish half out the door. They'll probably be coming earlier than what the campaign will do. I'll probably release them separately, just because campaigns. I don't know how long campaign is going to take. Uh, at least 3 months, if only just out of the playtesting, because it takes so long to playtest campaign content, at least without dedicated playtesters and with just random people. Um, so I'll probably release that uh, probably like second or third week of February. I still have a bunch of internal testing to do that I need to find a group for to work out the stuff that needed to get changed and hit on stuff that didn't get tested in the uh, in the tournament as well. But that should probably be coming out before the end of February. And after that, it's on to campaign and releasing all the campaign stuff. Of course, you can find some of it. I think there was a Board Game Geek post at some point that you can find it from. I can also will also probably be in the description of this video if you want to look at that. Although it will be getting reworked, so you might want to wait for that. There's an extra 2 missions out there. The finale and the third mission are getting reworked because they were a little bit shaky. Um, but if even if you want to just take the heroes and run run one of the base campaigns with the Confederacy and the heroes, then you can do that as well with all the stuff that's provided, I presume, in the description, assuming it's not forgotten.
So I know that people are going to post in the comments asking this. If people want to become a playtester in this project, how do they do that and how do they reach you?
Well, the best way to do so would be on the Imperial Assault uh, Discord, the ICP Discord, which I also presume will be linked in the description. And you can find me again. I am Jayjaxx, Jayjaxx, 2 X's, and you can either ping me there or you can my private messages are open. You can just message me, and I mean I can't 100% guarantee that yeah I'm going to give you stuff to play test, but I'm not going to have in all in all real universes. There's no way I'm not going to give you stuff if you want to play test. Just because I don't expect that I'm going to get like 40 people out of this. I'm going to get like 3. So yeah, you can hit me up there. Same thing if you have any questions. If you need help with any of the downloads, if you see anything that's weird, um, uh, most of the content should be easily available. But if for some reason it's not, you can reach out to me and I'll be able to help you out with that.
All right.
Um,
Awesome. Well, thanks for going through that all the cards or a lot of the cards with me and talking about design. I love talking
No
about
worries.
game design and all that stuff. So I think that is going to be it. And I'm going to take this recording and protect it like my precious baby until it gets up on the YouTubes. And
Yeah, you're not going to delete it again.
no, not going to do that.
Hmm.
Not like I
Yeah.
just deleted all those files like
Well,
young
it's good. I mean,
ones.
well, we covered more stuff. I think we covered them in greater depth and in uh, better fashion.
Yeah. All right. Thanks everybody
Well,
for checking out the podcast and watching on YouTube. And we will catch you for the next one.
all right, thank you very much.